I do personally think that actually this year Neil Lennon is probably my candidate for manager of the year, just because I think he's really built on what Rodgers has done. And I know some Celtic fans will say, they'll look at the League Cup final for instance and go, oh, that was a bit close, that's we should have lost that game, that's not good enough. Or they'll look at a couple of games in Europe where Celtic haven't really turned up and that's led to disappointment. But if we're judging managers purely on what they've done in the league this season, I think that Lennon has had an absolutely brilliant year. I mean, when you look at Celtic's points per game this season, they're averaging 2.67 per game. They only that's better than Rodgers managed in last season and the year before, and it's not miles away from what Rodgers managed during the Invincible season. He got managed 2.79 in that game. As I said, this year Lennon's on 2.67, so he's not a million miles away from that, and that has surely got to be the gold standard of any season in Scottish football. Even look back to his, obviously he came in at the end of last season. He's now averaging about 0.5 points per game more this season than he was last season, which again shows vast improvement for a team at the top of the table where it is harder to achieve that. In terms of goal scoring as well, this year they were on track to break Celtic's goal scoring record. I mean, they were averaging 2.97 goals per game. Again, that's better than anything Rodgers ever achieved. Even in the Invincible season, he only managed 2.79. So, and okay, there's maybe an argument to be made that they're about to, they still had Rangers to play again. They still had the rest of the split. So, you might have seen a decrease in the rate of goal scores, but certainly it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they could have done it. And certainly so far they have been better. And even again in defence as well. Last season when he came in, they were conceding 0.5 goals per game, and that's the lowest that it's been in the last few years. Now that has risen to 0.63 this season, but that's still better than Rodgers managing the Invincible season and the following season as well. So I think that there are tangible signs of progress in a lot of ways for Celtic, and I do think that had the season not been curtailed, they might have gone on to break. I don't think it was possible for them to break the points record, but in terms of the goals record that Rodgers set, and I think in terms of defence as well, there was a very real chance that they could have, really set new benchmarks. And Lennon deserves a hell of a lot of credit for that. Obviously, there's been a lot of chat about how they came back from the January break, they switched to the back three, and again, Lennon deserves a lot of credit there. He realised that the system had to change, that he maybe wasn't getting the most out of the players that he had at his disposal, and they've been sensational since then. I think they only dropped 2 points away to Livingston since they moved to that new system, and that kind of speaks for itself. No one's really figured out how to beat that yet, and for me, that's why Lennon's probably my manager of the season. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, I think it's hard to argue against when you look, just like you say, the sheer consistency. And I think, and I'll throw it to you, Stefan, in a second, but I think it was also the pressure he came in under after he won the League Cup and got the job permanently. That Scottish Cup, and then got the job permanently. Obviously, there's that kind of looming 9 in a row and having to continue the legacy Rodgers had. And I think you had the kind of some Rangers fans saying they were pleased it was Lennon that got it rather than maybe a new manager. They didn't really maybe see him as on the level as Rodgers. But I mean, there was nothing to suggest that he wasn't, given his previous record at Celtic, what he did at Hibs, minus maybe a blip at Bolton under difficult circumstances. His record speaks for itself. He's a very, very good manager. And then you kind of had at the start of the season the whole kind of thing with Cluj when they get knocked out of Europe in the qualifiers for the Champions League, and that obviously then you had people absolutely fuming, saying that he wasn't the right man for the job and he hadn't bought well and stuff like that. I'm guessing what I'm going to ask you first of all, Stefan, is he proved, it might seem a bit of a simplistic question, but has he proved those doubters wrong after that? Because from then, I mean, his record's been pretty spectacular.
Yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? I think you could probably go back on our own feed, and I'm pretty sure we've done specific episodes on Rodgers leaving and Neil Lennon getting the job, and if I'm not mistaken, we were all quite positive about Lennon. I certainly remember myself being, so I'm not trying to say that from a position of kind of I told you so or anything like that. Despite his kind of unceremonious departure from Hibs, I thought he was doing a very solid job there. I thought he did an outstanding job at Celtic the first time round. And he came into a Celtic squad that it really can't be overstated just how much he had to pick things up really quickly. He had to conclude that season, which obviously ended with a Scottish Cup final. He had to pick up a squad that, without any disrespect to Celtic as a club, I think a lot of the players in that squad would have came to the squad specifically to play under Brendan Rodgers, and the manner in which he did quickly depart could have very easily led to a straight wholesale fire or wholesale departure of a lot of the key players, following Rodgers out the door through that. And not only did I think Lennon's managed to brilliantly steady the ship, but he's also quite crucially managed to come in and really do his own thing. It would have been very easy for him to come in and to basically just try and follow Rodgers' rulebook or playbook to the letter, and try not to step out of his lane, and to really try and appease Celtic fans who were concerned that he was, a Celtic legend and a fan favourite. And I don't think I'm unfair in saying this, a lot of Celtic fans really, really didn't think he was going to be able to improve on what Brendan Rodgers had done. And I think a lot of them were really concerned that he wasn't going to be able to match the level that Rodgers had taken Celtic to domestically. And that, I think, is crucially what Lennon has undoubtedly proved wrong. As James went through the numbers there to just kind of illustrate how impressive Celtic have been. I think you can maybe go one step further, James, and you could maybe make some strong arguments that undefeated season that does set all the gold standards. Lennon wasn't up against as strong a domestic opponent as he was this season, in my opinion. Although I'll maybe leave that to the kind of pedantic threads of Twitter. I think it's so, not only is it impressive that he's managed to kind of get within grasp of that season for Celtic, but I think he's managed to do so with his own system, his own tactics. He's brought in his own players, and I've been thoroughly impressed. I think what we have to really consider as well is that just the amount of pressure that Lennon was under to kind of get this right. I think any manager coming in to replace Rodgers was always going to have to do so under a huge amount of pressure, under a huge shadow, and the manner in which Lennon had to do it so quickly, and with so much kind of pressure on him as a manager and on his reputation as a manager, and I think, honestly, I just think the best kind of compliment you can pay Lennon is that we're now kind of 12 months on, and there's very little doubt over him and what he's doing at Celtic. There have been some bumps along the way, as you mentioned, Neil. Obviously, the Cluj game in Europe, but I really think I'm really impressed with the manner in which he's brought his own players in, and he really did have to, because he basically had to replace that entire back line, which Rodgers had basically neglected for that last season. He had to get rid of some big players. Obviously, Scott Sinclair is perhaps the most obvious one. And I think also what really impresses me as well is the manner in which he completely changed his tactics after the winter break. We kind of referenced it on this show before, so I won't go into huge detail, but after that defeat to Rangers in December, Lennon really went back to the drawing board and kind of ripped it up, and 3 or 4 other metaphors I'll mix in there, and came back with a brand new system and tactics, and it allowed Celtic to really hit the ground running, and it really illustrated how intuitive he can be as a tactician, especially against a Rangers team who really looked like they were kind of struggling to kind of keep going at that point, and they were kind of looking a little complacent. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm kind of running out of superlatives here for Celtic and for Neil Lennon, and I do largely agree with James. I think the manner in which he's managed to step out of Brendan Rodgers' shadow is an achievement that you can stack up against any in Scottish football this season. And although I know a lot of fans from other clubs would argue that Lennon's managed to do that with a huge bag of cash that the likes of Gary Holt simply can't or ever will have, I think in the context of what demands are put on Celtic, I think Lennon has come through it with flying colours.